Give to give, not give to get, and why this single shift transforms your entire sales life. Let me tell you something that took me way too long to learn. For years I was chasing leads, chasing replies, chasing closes, chasing people who clearly didn't want to be chased. And the harder I chased, the more exhausted I became, and the worse my results got. I remember one particular stretch where I was making 50, 60 outreach calls a day. Cold emails, follow-ups, LinkedIn messages. I had spreadsheets. I had CRM tags. I had sequences and automations and all the things you're supposed to have. And at the end of every week, I'd look at my pipeline and think, why is nothing moving? I was doing everything the playbooks told me to do. More activity, more volume, more hustle. And yet the pipeline stayed stuck. The conversation stayed shallow. The prospects stayed distant. And then one day, something happened that changed everything. Not a big dramatic moment. Not some conference revelation or a best-selling book quote that hit me like lightning. It was quieter than that. It was a conversation with someone who wasn't even a prospect. I was talking to a guy, let's call him Martin, who ran a mid-sized logistics company. We'd connected through a mutual contact, and I was, honestly, just killing time. I wasn't trying to sell him anything. He wasn't in my target market. I had no agenda. And because I had no agenda, something interesting happened. I actually listened. Martin was telling me about a problem he was having with his sales team. They were struggling with follow-up. Not the mechanics of it, they had tools for that, but the psychology of it. His reps would have great first meetings, build rapport, get the prospect nodding and smiling, and then nothing. The deal would go cold. The rep would move on, and Martin couldn't figure out why. Now, because I wasn't in sales mode, I didn't pitch him anything. I just shared what I'd observed from my own experience. I told him about a pattern I'd noticed, that most salespeople treat follow-up as a reminder. Hey, just checking in. Wanted to circle back. Any updates on your end? And that kind of follow-up doesn't create value. It extracts attention. It says, I need something from you. And the prospect feels that. They feel the pull. And they pull away. I told Martin that the reps who consistently close aren't the ones who follow up the most. They're the ones who follow up with something useful, a relevant article, a connection to someone who could help with a different problem, an insight about the prospect's industry, something that says, I'm thinking about your world, not just my quota. Martin got quiet for a second. Then he said, that's exactly what's missing. Can you come talk to my team about this? I wasn't trying to get a client. I wasn't positioning. I wasn't using a framework or a closing technique. I was just being genuinely helpful. And that genuine helpfulness opened a door that no amount of cold outreach ever could have. That conversation with Martin became the turning point in how I think about sales. Not as a process of extraction, extracting attention, extracting interest, extracting commitment, but as a process of contribution. And when I made that shift, my entire pipeline changed. Not overnight, but permanently. Here's what I want to dig into today, because I think this idea sounds simple on the surface. Create value first. And most people hear it and nod and say, yeah, of course, and then go right back to chasing. Because we live in a culture, especially in the business world, especially in the Western sales ecosystem, that is obsessed with activity metrics. Calls made, emails sent, demos booked, pipeline velocity, and all of those things matter. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they don't, but they matter far less than we think if the foundation is wrong. And the foundation that most salespeople build on is wrong. The foundation most of us start with is, I have something to sell. I need to find people who will buy it. I need to convince them. I need to overcome their objections. I need to close. That entire sequence starts with you. Your product, your need, your quota, your timeline. And the prospect feels every bit of that. Naval Ravikant, one of the thinkers I return to constantly, talks about this idea of specific knowledge and creating value in ways that feel like play to you but look like work to others. And embedded in that philosophy is something profound about sales. The best salespeople don't feel like salespeople to the people they're selling to. They feel like advisors. They feel like allies. They feel like someone who showed up with something useful before they ever asked for anything in return. Naval also talks about playing long-term games with long-term people. And this is where the pipeline shift really happens. Because when you create value first, genuinely, consistently, without keeping score, you're not just generating a transaction. You're building a relationship. And relationships compound. Just like knowledge compounds. Just like interest compounds. Relationships over time become the most valuable asset you have. But here's the thing that trips people up. They hear create value first, and they think it means give away free stuff to get attention. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a tactic. That's a lead magnet wrapped in generosity language, and prospects can smell it from a mile away. What I'm talking about is a fundamental orientation, a way of showing up in every interaction. Whether it's a discovery call, a networking event, a LinkedIn comment, a follow-up email, a casual conversation at a coffee shop, where your default mode is, how can I be useful to this person right now, regardless of whether they ever buy from me? That regardless is the key. That's where the real shift happens. Because as long as your generosity has a hidden invoice attached to it, it's not generosity. It's strategy. And strategy without authenticity is just manipulation with better branding. Let me go deeper into what happened after that conversation with Martin. Because the story didn't end there. And the way it unfolded taught me more about sales than any training program ever did. So Martin invited me to speak to his team. I didn't charge him. I didn't even think about charging him. I spent about 90 minutes with his 12-person sales team, walking them through what I call value-forward follow-up. It's not a complicated concept. It's simply the practice of never reaching out to a prospect empty-handed. Every touch point should contain something, an insight, a resource, a connection, a question that makes them think. That demonstrates you understand their world and you're invested in their success, not just their purchase order. I shared examples. I walked through scenarios. I did some role-playing with his reps, and by the end of it, something had shifted in that room. You could feel it. The reps weren't just learning a technique. They were seeing their job differently. They were starting to understand that sales isn't something you do to people, It's something you do for people, and that distinction changes everything. Now, here's what I didn't expect. 2 weeks later, Martin called me. He said his team's follow-up conversations had already started to change. Prospects were responding differently. Not all of them, but enough that his reps were noticing. He asked me if I had anything more structured, a system, a program, something his team could use on an ongoing basis. And that's when I told him about the AI training tool I'd been building. See, I'd been developing this system, an AI-powered coaching agent designed specifically for salespeople, for months. But I'd been struggling to find the right way to introduce it. Every time I tried to pitch it cold, I got the same polite resistance. Interesting. Let me think about it. Sounds cool, but we're not looking for new tools right now. Send me some more info. You know the drill. But with Martin, the conversation was completely different, because I hadn't led with the tool. I'd led with the value. I'd led with genuine help. And by the time the tool came up, it wasn't a pitch. It was a solution to a problem he already knew he had, offered by someone he already trusted. Martin became my first real enterprise client, not because I had the best product, not because I had the best pitch, but because I showed up first as someone who cared about his problem more than my sale. And that's the pipeline shift I'm talking about. Let me unpack this a little more, because I think there are layers here that are easy to miss. When I say create value first and your pipeline changes, I'm not just talking about a sales tactic. I'm talking about a complete reorientation of how you think about your role in the market. Most salespeople, and honestly, most entrepreneurs, most freelancers, most people trying to build any kind of business, operate from a deficit mindset. They're thinking about what they need. They need revenue. They need clients. They need validation. They need proof that their idea works. And that need radiates from every interaction. It shows up in their tone. It shows up in their urgency. It shows up in the way they over-explain their product and under-explore their prospect's world. And the market responds to that energy exactly the way you'd expect. It pulls back, because nobody wants to be someone else's rescue plan. Nobody wants to feel like they're being recruited to solve your cash flow problem. But when you flip it, when you show up already full, already contributing, already focused on the other person's success, the market responds completely differently. People lean in. They ask questions. They refer you to their friends. They remember you. Not because you were impressive, but because you were helpful. And helpful is rare. Genuinely, consistently, no strings attached helpful is astonishingly rare. Charlie Munger, Buffett's longtime partner and one of the sharpest minds in business history, used to say something I think about constantly. He said, "The best way to get what you want is to deserve what you want. Not desire it. Not demand it. Not manipulate your way into it. Deserve it. And you deserve it by being genuinely valuable to the people around you. That's not a soft, feel-good platitude. That's a hard-nosed business strategy spoken by a billionaire who spent 70 years watching what actually works in markets and in life. And it aligns perfectly with what I've experienced in my own sales journey. The deals that closed easiest were never the ones I pushed hardest. They were the ones where I'd already created so much value that the close felt like a formality. The prospect wasn't being convinced. They were being confirmed in a decision they'd already made, because I'd already proven through my actions that I was someone worth investing in. Now I want to address something directly, because I know there are people listening who are thinking, "That's great, Jay, but I have rent to pay. I can't just go around being helpful and hope money shows up." I hear you, I've been there. I've had months where the bank account was screaming and the pipeline was empty, and the idea of creating value first felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. But here's what I've come to understand, and this is crucial. Creating value first is not the same as working for free. It's not the same as giving everything away. It's not the same as being a doormat or a charity. Creating value first means leading every interaction with usefulness rather than neediness. It means spending 15 minutes researching a prospect's business before you call them, so that when you open your mouth, you can say something relevant instead of something generic. It means sharing an insight on LinkedIn that actually helps your audience think differently, instead of posting another 5 tips to crush your sales quota listicle that everybody scrolls past. It means that when a prospect says no, you don't disappear. You stay in their orbit. You keep providing value. You keep showing up as someone worth knowing. And 6 months later, when their situation changes, when their current vendor drops the ball, when their budget shifts, when a new initiative lands on their desk, you're the first person they think of. Not because you badgered them, because you mattered to them. That's the pipeline shift. It's not about generating more leads. It's about becoming the kind of person that leads naturally flow toward. I want to tell you about another moment that crystallized this for me. I was at a networking event, one of those evening mixers where everybody has a name tag and a 30-second elevator pitch locked and loaded. And I noticed something fascinating. The people who were doing the most networking, walking around, handing out cards, delivering their pitches, were having the least impact. They were collecting contacts, not building connections. And then there was this woman. She was standing near the bar, having what looked like a genuinely engaging conversation with one person. Just one, for probably 20 minutes. While everyone else was working the room, she was working the relationship. And I watched the person she was talking to light up, nodding, laughing, leaning in, pulling out their phone to show her something. That person felt seen, felt understood, felt valued. I walked over after the conversation ended and introduced myself. Turns out she ran a small consulting firm, and she told me something I've never forgotten. She said, "I don't network. I just try to be the most interesting and helpful person in every conversation I have. The business takes care of itself. The business takes care of itself. That's the principle. Not that you ignore business development. Not that you sit in a cave creating value and waiting for the universe to reward you. But that when your default mode is genuine contribution, you create a gravity that pulls opportunities toward you in ways that no cold outreach campaign ever could. And this is what I mean when I say the pipeline changes. It doesn't just fill up with more names. It fills up with better names. People who already trust you. People who already understand your value. People who come to you pre-sold, not because you ran a clever funnel, but because someone they trust told them, "You need to talk to this person." That's the highest form of sales: referral, reputation, word of mouth. And you can't manufacture it. You can only earn it. And you earn it by creating value first. Let me bring this back to something personal because I think it's important to be transparent about where I am in this journey. I'm not standing here as some guru who's figured it all out. I'm a salesperson. I'm in the trenches. I'm building something, an AI-powered training system for salespeople, and I'm selling it every day to real companies with real gatekeepers with real objections. And every day I face the same temptation that every salesperson faces: the temptation to shortcut, to blast out another 100 emails, to push harder on a lukewarm lead, to optimize for activity instead of impact. But I've learned the hard way, through failure after failure, that the shortcut is actually the long way around. And the long way, building genuine relationships, creating real value, showing up as someone worth knowing, is actually the fastest path to the results I want. Because here's what happens when you create value first. Your conversations change. Instead of pitching, you're diagnosing. Instead of convincing, you're collaborating. Instead of overcoming objections, you're solving problems together. The whole dynamic shifts from adversarial to allied. And that shift doesn't just feel better, it converts better. When a prospect feels like you're on their side, genuinely on their side, not performing being on their side, their resistance drops. Their walls come down. They start telling you the truth about their problems instead of the polished version they give to every other vendor. And when you know the truth about someone's problems, you can actually help them. And when you actually help them, they buy. Not because you closed them, because you earned them. There's a concept in psychology called the reciprocity principle. Robert Cialdini wrote about it extensively. The basic idea is that when someone does something genuinely valuable for us, we feel a natural, almost unconscious desire to reciprocate. Not out of obligation, although obligation is part of it, but out of connection. We want to give back to people who give to us. It's hardwired. But here's the part that Cialdini emphasizes and most salespeople miss. Reciprocity only works when the initial giving is perceived as genuine. If the prospect feels like your value is a tactic, if they sense the hidden agenda behind your helpful article or your free consultation, the reciprocity impulse doesn't just fail. It reverses. Instead of wanting to give back, they feel manipulated. And manipulated prospects don't buy. They run. So the create value first strategy only works if it's not a strategy at all. It has to be real. It has to come from a place of genuine care for the other person's success. And I know that sounds almost impossibly idealistic, but I want to challenge that assumption. Because caring about your prospect's success isn't naive. It's smart. It's the smartest thing you can do. Think about it. If your prospect succeeds, if they grow, if they thrive, if they achieve what they're trying to achieve, what happens to you? They become a long-term client. They become a referral source. They become a case study. They become proof that what you do works. Their success is your success. They're not separate outcomes. They're the same outcome. So when I say create value first, I'm not asking you to sacrifice your business interests. I'm asking you to realize that your business interests and your prospects' interests are aligned. And when you operate from that alignment, genuinely, consistently, over time, everything changes. I want to talk about something else that happens when you commit to this approach, because it's something nobody tells you about and it's one of the most powerful parts. When you stop chasing and start creating, your anxiety drops. I used to wake up every morning with this knot in my stomach. The pipeline anxiety. How many deals are going to close this month? How many new leads do I need to generate today? What if that big prospect ghosts me? What if this quarter is a disaster? That anxiety was running my life. It was running my sales calls, making me pushy when I should have been patient, making me desperate when I should have been confident. And prospects could feel it. Of course they could. Desperation has a frequency and everybody can tune into it. But when I shifted to a value-first approach, something unexpected happened. The anxiety started to dissolve. Not because my pipeline magically filled up overnight, it didn't, but because my focus changed. Instead of obsessing over outcomes I couldn't control, will this deal close? Will that prospect respond? I started obsessing over inputs I could control. Am I being genuinely helpful today? Am I sharing something useful? Am I showing up as someone worth knowing? And when you focus on inputs rather than outcomes, you enter a different mental state. You enter what I can only describe as a creative flow. You stop performing and start contributing. You stop calculating and start connecting. And paradoxically, that's when the outcomes improve. I think about this a lot. The idea that confidence isn't about believing in yourself. It's about not caring too much about the result. It's about being so invested in the process of creating value that the outcome becomes secondary. Not unimportant. Secondary. And that subtle shift from outcome obsessed to process invested changes everything about how you show up. Because when you're not attached to the outcome of a particular conversation, you're free. You're free to listen without an agenda. You're free to ask questions without steering. You're free to actually be present with another human being. And presence, true presence, is the rarest and most valuable thing you can offer anyone in a business context. Think about the last time someone was truly present with you, not checking their phone, not thinking about what they were going to say next, not calculating how to move you toward a decision, just there, listening, curious, engaged. How did that feel? Did it feel like a sales call? No, it felt like a real conversation, and real conversations are where real deals happen. Let me share one more story, because I think this illustrates the compound effect of value creation better than any theory could. About a year ago, I started posting consistently on professional forums and communities, not promoting my product, not pitching my services, just sharing insights I'd gathered from my own sales experience and from the AI tools I'd been building. Observations about what makes follow-up effective. Insights about how to read a prospect's real concerns beneath their surface objections. Frameworks for thinking about the sales conversation as a diagnostic process rather than a persuasion process. Most of these posts got modest engagement, A few likes, a comment or two, nothing viral, nothing dramatic. And honestly, there were weeks when I wondered if it was worth the time. Weeks when I thought, I should just spend this hour making more calls. But I kept going, not because I had some grand strategy, but because the act of sharing what I was learning was itself valuable to me. It forced me to clarify my thinking. It forced me to articulate ideas that were vague and half-formed in my head. It forced me to be a student of my own craft. And that's a form of value creation too, value you create for yourself. Then, about 6 months in, something started to happen. People started reaching out to me. Not in response to a specific post, but because they'd been following along quietly, reading, watching, forming an impression. And when they had a need, when they were looking for someone who understood sales at a deeper level, who could help their team think differently about client relationships, they thought of me. One of those people was a director of sales at a tech company in Europe. She told me she'd been reading my posts for 3 months before she reached out. 3 months. And when she finally contacted me, she didn't ask for a demo. She didn't ask for a price sheet. She said, I feel like I already know how you think. Can we talk about what you could do for my team? That's a completely different conversation than a cold outreach. That's a conversation where trust already exists, where credibility has already been established, where the selling has already been done quietly through months of consistent value creation. And that conversation led to one of the most meaningful client relationships I've ever had. Not because I sold harder than anyone else, because I served longer than anyone else. This brings me to a broader point that I think is essential for anyone in sales, or anyone trying to build a personal brand, or launch a business, or simply navigate a career in this rapidly changing world. We live in an era where attention is the scarcest resource. Everyone is fighting for it. Brands are fighting for it. Content creators are fighting for it. Salespeople are fighting for it. And the default mode for fighting for attention is interruption. Interrupt someone's inbox. Interrupt their scroll. Interrupt their day with a cold call. But interruption is a losing game. Because the more people interrupt, the higher the walls get. Spam filters get smarter. Ad blockers get more popular. People get better at ignoring, deleting, scrolling past. The alternative to interruption is attraction. And attraction is built on value. When you consistently create value, when you become someone who is genuinely useful, genuinely insightful, genuinely worth paying attention to, you don't have to interrupt anyone. They come to you. They seek you out. They ask for your time instead of you begging for theirs. And this isn't just a nicer way to do business. It's a more effective way. Because the people who come to you are already interested, already open, already predisposed to trust you. Your conversion rates go up. Your sales cycles get shorter. Your client quality improves. Your retention improves. Everything improves. Because the foundation of the relationship is different. It's the difference between building on sand and building on rock. A transaction built on interruption and persuasion is sand. A relationship built on genuine value and trust is rock. And when the storms come, when the economy tightens, when budgets get cut, when competitors undercut your price, The relationships built on rock survive. The transactions built on sand wash away. I want to address one more thing before I wrap up, because it's something I struggle with myself, and I think a lot of people in sales struggle with it too. There's a voice in your head, maybe it's been talking to you through this whole video, that says, "This is great in theory, but the real world doesn't work this way." In the real world, you need to be aggressive. You need to be persistent. You need to close hard. And I want to acknowledge that voice because it's not entirely wrong. Sales does require persistence. It does require courage. It does require the willingness to ask for the business. Creating value first doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean never asking. It doesn't mean avoiding the close. What it means is earning the right to ask. What it means is building enough trust and demonstrating enough value that when you do ask, when you say, "I think we should work together, here's how," the prospect doesn't feel ambushed. They feel invited. They feel like the ask is a natural next step in a relationship that's already been established, not a premature grab from a stranger. And here's the truth about persistence. Value-based persistence and desperation-based persistence look completely different. Desperation-based persistence sounds like just checking in, following up on my last email. Have you had a chance to review the proposal? It's hollow, it's self-serving, it's exhausting for both parties. Value-based persistence sounds like, "I saw this article about a challenge your industry is facing and thought of your team. I just had a conversation with someone who solved a problem similar to yours. Want me to connect you? I've been thinking about what you said about your Q4 goals, and I had an idea I wanted to run by you." Same frequency of contact, completely different quality, and the prospect feels the difference immediately. One version says, "I need something from you." The other version says, "I'm thinking about you." And those two messages produce completely different results. So here's what I want to leave you with today. If your pipeline is stuck, if your deals are stalling, if your prospects are ghosting, if your conversions are flat, before you add more activity, before you send more emails, before you make more calls, ask yourself this question. Am I creating enough value to earn the attention I'm asking for? Because attention isn't free. Trust isn't free. A prospect's time isn't free. These are precious resources that people guard fiercely. And the only currency that can unlock them is genuine value. Not tricks, not tactics, not cleverly worded subject lines or urgency-based closing techniques. Value. Real, tangible, useful value that makes someone's life or business better, regardless of whether they ever become your customer. When you make that shift, when you stop trying to extract value from people and start trying to create value for people, your pipeline doesn't just change. Your entire career changes. Your relationships change. Your confidence changes. Your energy changes. Your life changes. Because you're no longer showing up as someone who needs something. You're showing up as someone who brings something. And the world responds very differently to those two people. I know this because I've been both. I've been the desperate closer, grinding through calls, chasing every lead, treating every prospect like a number on a spreadsheet. And I've been the value creator, showing up with genuine curiosity and genuine helpfulness, trusting that the business will follow the value. The second version of me closes more deals, makes more money, sleeps better at night, and actually enjoys the work. Not because sales became easy. It didn't. But because it became meaningful. And meaningful work has a power that no amount of hustle can match. So if you take nothing else from this conversation, take this. Lead with value. Lead with generosity. Lead with genuine care for the person across the table. Do it consistently. Do it without keeping score. Do it especially when it's hard and especially when you can't see how it's going to pay off. Because it will pay off. Not always in the way you expect. Not always on the timeline you want, but it will pay off. Because value compounds. Relationships compound. Trust compounds. And in a world where everyone is fighting for attention, the person who consistently creates value isn't fighting at all. They're attracting, and attraction always wins. This is Jay. I'm out here selling, learning, building, same as you. If anything in this resonated, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one.